It's a pleasure to be sat here with Dr. Pheobe Caldwell, introducing her to you. Some of you are meeting her again, you've met her before, and you'll know that Phoebe's been around in this field of learning disability and of autism for well over 40 years, is that fair? 45 years. And part of the purpose of what we're talking about today is the past, present and future. And between us, Phoebe and I have got quite a lot of past. And I want to hear more about Phoebe's past. And I know that you got into this field kind of by chance, by accident. You needed a job. You were raising 5 children. You needed a job.
Yeah.
And you found a job in a newspaper.
That's right.
What was it?
And I had no experience at all. The job was as an occupational therapy helper. I had no experience at all of this, but I needed money. So I presented myself. They wanted a man because he was big and strong, but they thought I might do.
You'd do.
They hadn't had any suitable applicants.
This is in a long-stay hospital for people.
In a long-stay hospital
Yes,
for mentally handicapped, as they called it
Yeah.
those days. And I spent the first day in what was known as the corridor, which had 11 very, very disturbed men.
So there you are, you're terrified in your corridor, in your alcove, and you're watching this furniture fly around. Tell us more, what happened?
Well, I think basically they couldn't get anybody else who'd applied. So I got the job. At the end of the first day, they said, take Colin back to the ward, he knows the way. So Colin looked at me, he was a very small man, took my hand and dragged me out and grabbed a passing trolley and leapt onto it, and off he went at a terrific speed. And out of the front gate, abandoned the trolley, rushed up towards the main road, where there was lots of traffic. And I was panting along behind him, thinking I'm not going to do this job at all. Then, fortunately, his braces snapped, and he was hobbled. So I managed to catch up with him. And I said, come along, Colin, very far, too down. And so we went back. And that was the beginning. And then I was fortunate enough to meet a psychologist who was gave me one piece of very good advice. She was almost unique, actually, among the people that I met at the time in Farley. And she said, try and find something interesting. Don't try and make them do what, ordinary things. Just find something that they are in, each one is interested in, and work from that.
So this was a bit of advice from a psychologist in the 70s, which was clearly saying, stop trying to get people to do what you want and see what they're interested in.
Exactly. And
what a building block.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this was really early because that wasn't around for a long time.
No.
Point of view.
No.
Yeah.
Tell us about the chap and plastic and furniture.
But he would break into furniture, break cupboards and shelves in order to get at plastic. And then we realised it was actually plastic balls. And we decided to make him a box to keep his balls. And so I had him into the workshop, and hand on hand we actually made the only thing a box about this size, big box, with a lid which could be locked, but a very simple lock which we just had to pick. It meant that not everybody could unlock it.
So his things were precious, and they were contained.
Things were contained, and we put it by his bed. And he stopped breaking furniture. And he in order to retain plastic, he'd actually been eating anything plastic. And he'd been x-rayed and he'd get 35 bits of plastic in his stomach.
So in a way, this is a beginning of your life's work of recognising the reason behind a behaviour. You're seeing somebody who's breaking furniture to get to plastic, and when he's got to plastic, he's swallowing it, and you're thinking, okay, yes. So his behaviour is telling you something intrinsically important about this chap, and then you're addressing that need rather than trying to change the behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message that so many of us have got from your work and continue to get from it. And that's what I want to hear more about in your next step of researching this.
Fortunately, I met Oliver Russell at my previous job at Pheobe, and where he was trying to sort some of the things out.
So he was understanding your work and the purpose of it.
And he was at the Laura Fry Institute in Bristol University, and he got me a Joseph Roundtree Fellowship for 4 years, which meant that I could go around the country to various different places, partly teaching and partly learning. So I had 4 years of different experiences. Some of them were about a week, some of them were several months.
But tell us about your supervisor for that fellowship.
My mentor I worked for 4 years was Geraint Jeffrey, who everybody called Gary. And he was clinical psychologist at Bristol Hospital. And I actually worked directly for him for some time, but he also oversaw my work. And he was the man who started what was then known as augmented mothering.
Yes.
And Dave Hugh changed the name to intensive interaction because, again, it was more normal.
Yes.
And
less sexist as well.
Yes, exactly. He said, and one day, they kept on bringing me people who nobody could manage, and I didn't know what to do. And most of them had autism. And so one day, out of sheer desperation, and these are his words, I started to echo back what he were doing. And I was greatly surprised when they started sitting up and taking notice. Now, this was the first trial of realizing that a word which I hesitate to use now because it's misused as copying had this extraordinary effect. So this tapping into how the something the brain recognized and therefore was looking for, because otherwise it was in a sea of disturbance.
So your interest has carried on, your research has carried on, your reading has. What I want to know is, what are you really interested in now, in the present? What's your area of interest and research and thinking?
There's very dramatic advances in what we actually know about the relationship between the environment and the genetic build-up and how this is affecting the synapses. That's the joins between two different nerves. What we know now is that autism is quite definitely a problem of connections between two different neurons or two different areas of the brain. You can see these lack of connections in the brain.
Sorry, I'm interrupting there. You can see it in terms of a brain scan and seeing what areas of the brain are active and overactive and having to work really hard or not at all. Yes, yeah. And this is new, 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't have imagined being able to see that. Okay.
And this is a question of the brain cells not being, the synapses between the neurons are normally jumped by chemicals. And that's under the control of something called astrocytes, which are a particular form of cells in the brain, not neurons. And they produce these chemicals which jump this gap where one neuron meets another. And it's going wrong there. Getting the wrong chemicals, or you're not getting the chemicals. They're just not joining up properly. And this can be seen. And so we've got a situation now where, on the one hand, we've got an environment which can affect the parent's genes, which goes into a genetic fragility, it's called. The genes are not sending the right, activating the right messages. You then get to the astrocytes, which are these cells in the brain, which are not nerve cells. They're like the sort of They're in charge of the synapses,
Mm-hmm.
and they disturb the connections. So you've got this connectivity problem, and that directly affects behaviour.
Yeah.
Because it's not all connected up properly. Now, all of us, everybody in this whole room has got some brain misconnections. Everybody walking around here has got at least 12
Yeah, that's
different
fascinating.
ones. And I think this is really important.
Yeah.
We are the lucky ones, the ones where it doesn't affect our behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people with behavioural problems, the particular disconnections are affecting their behaviour. And they can be agonizingly painful trying to process this stuff. And when they have meltdown, they're desperate to try and make sense of the world around.
And this, to me, there is such a direct link here, Phoebe, hearing you talk like this, that scientifically we're getting more and more information about what might be going on for somebody, and tuning into understanding that is just a direct link with right back when you were doing things with your chap with plastic and making a box for him. You're tuning into his behaviour. But now we're just so much closer to understanding why. Yes, yes.
Why does this guy need plastic bottles? It's the only way he can connect.
Yeah.
In a world he can't connect.
Yeah. Tuning in to people, I'm just thinking of Us in a Bus's work over the years, has been hugely influential in our work with people without a diagnosis of autism, but with a profound and multiple learning disability. And again, we found that unless we're trying to understand why somebody might be behaving in a certain way, we can't begin to start understanding and tuning into their self-confirming behaviours through intensive interaction. We have to understand what's going on for them. And they might not have a diagnosis of autism, but those issues of connectivity, that's what you see as a link as well?
I think it's possible that, in fact, what we're looking at is places in the brain where things are not linked up.
Yeah.
If you want to be politically correct, they're not linked up in the most effective way.
Yeah. I think that's, yes, if they're not linked up in the most effective way, it's kind of our job and the job of everybody who supports people to think, okay, so what can we learn from their behaviour that helps us present ourselves and the environment and our interactions in the most supportive way?
Brain can
yes,
cope with.
yes, in the most copable way, the most processable way. There's no stopping you. You're still writing. You're writing a variety of things. You've recently published 2 new books.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us about how the autism respecting difference came about.
This one.
Yeah.
This came about because I was getting a number of letters from parents, absolutely desperate, saying my son usually is being supported by people, young people who maybe come from job centre or something. They don't know anything about autism, and they are basically a bit scared of the meltdowns, and so prompted by the senior members of staff, they are going for control rather than for a relationship.
Yeah.
And actually they don't understand what is causing these meltdowns. Mm-hmm. And they are actually doing a lot of damage. Mm-hmm. The whole situation is getting much worse.
I just want to say there that that's so interesting, isn't it? That we are still in the 21st century. There are so many people facing the prospect of being controlled rather than related to.
Yeah.
Fairly convinced you're going to carry on reading and thinking and writing and sharing your knowledge and experience. But more specifically, looking towards the future, let's say you have the brand new Secretary of State for Education or the Secretary of State for Social Care sitting in front of you and using polite language, Phoebe. What is it that you would like to say to them? What do you want them to do? What do they need to do in terms of supporting children with a whole range of complex needs, including autism. What do they need to do in terms of supporting adults with those needs?
Yes, it's not only children.
No.
We need to recast education. Teachers, GPs,
Yeah.
who haven't got. The complaint is that they just do not know what autism is about. They know about the effects. They're still working on the triad of impairments.
Yes.
Which is at least 20 on years the effects rather than on the causes. Psychologists, psychiatrists, because they're all trained before what we now know. I'm now learning about. Because these people are extremely busy and overworked, they are not able to read the width of journals. For example, trigeminal neuralgia, which crops up more frequently in autism. That's the pain in the back of the jaw, not in the teeth, in the back of the jaw. That is written about in dental journals. Well, who's going to read?
The GP hasn't got time to read the dental journals. Yes. Yeah. So there needs to be a dissemination of actually some really quite basic knowledge that teachers, GPs, psychologists, etc. need to know.
So please think about this business of connectivity, failures in connectivity as a basis for behavioural distress.
So, we've got a chance. There's a room full of people here. So this is what we're saying, is it? Just be aware of the issues of connectivity.
People will say, you've got to be an expert to diagnose it. Actually, you don't really have to be an expert, to be quite honest. Because one thing is you look and see if they're flinching when they look out of the barn window. Or do they want a cap on? Or do they like a particular one because of the colour of the walls? Or can they not stand a particular dress because of its spottiness or whatever? Can you see a flinch when the dog barks? Even if they don't go into meltdown. So I'm still working on Zoom. Whether I shall be and that's about, I think, what I can manage.
Yeah. Well, we're incredibly glad and grateful that you're still managing that you're talking, you're thinking, you're sharing your knowledge, Phoebe. And thanks for sharing that in this video.